Donatello di Niccolò de Bettobardi was born in Florence, Italy, sometime in 1386. His friends and family gave him the nickname Donatello. He was the son of Niccolò de Bettobardi, a member of the Florentine Wool Combers Guild. This gave young Donatello status as the son of a craftsman and placed him on a path of working in the trades. He was educated at the home of the Martells, a wealthy and influential Florentine family of bankers and art patrons, closely tied to the Medici family. It was here that he probably first received artistic training from a local goldsmith. He learned metallurgy and the fabrication of metals and other substances. He died of unknown causes on December 13, 1466 in Florence and was buried in the Basilica of San Lorenzo next to Cosimo de' Medici. David 1440 to 1460 bronze, perhaps Donatello's landmark work and one of the greatest sculptural works of the early Renaissance, was his bronze statue of David. This work signals the return of the nude sculpture in the round figure, and because it was the first such work like this in over 1,000 years. It is one of the most important works in the history of Western art. David was the first freestanding bronze cast statue of the Renaissance era as well as the first nude sculpture of a male since the classical sculpture of ancient Greece. Penitent Magdalene. The Penitent Magdalene is a wooden sculpture of Mary Magdalene by the Italian Renaissance sculptor Donatello, created around 1453 to 1455. The sculpture was probably commissioned for the baptistry of Florence. The piece was received with astonishment for its unprecedented realism. It is now in the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo in Florence.
What did Donatello discover? Donatello discovered a new method of sculpting inspired by the works of ancient sculptors. He recast traditional biblical figures with a high degree of naturalism and individualism. His sketchato technique for sculpting in relief was also highly innovative. What are the three facts about Donatello? First, Donatello worked for most of his career in the city of Florence. Second, Donatello never married or had a children. Third, Donatello's first marble statue of David is said to have inspired Michelangelo's famous statue of the same subject. What are some of Donatello's accomplishments? Donatello achieved a great deal of sculpture. His naturalistic portrayal of his figures was groundbreaking. He created masterpieces in bronze, as in the Feast of Herod, in marbles, such as his statue of prophets for the Florence Cathedral, and in wood, such as the Penitent Magdalene. What art did Donatello make? Donatello was a sculptor who worked with a variety of mediums: stones, bronze, wood, wax, and clay. He is most famous for his realistic statue of bronze and marbles, and for his detailed relief works. Contribution of Donatello. Rapidly maturing in his art, Donatello soon began to develop a style all his own, with figures much more dramatic and emotional. Between 1411 and 1413, he sculpted the marble figure Saint Mark, placed in an exterior niche of the Ars Michel Church, which also served as the chapel of Florence's powerful craft and trade guilds. In 1415, Donatello completed the marble statue of a seated Saint John Evangelist for the cathedral in Florence. Both works shows a decisive move away from the Gothic style and towards more a classical technique.
In 1443, the family of the famous mercenary Erasmo da Narni, who had died earlier that year, called Donatello to the city of Padua. In 1450, a bronze statue called Gattamelata was completed by Donatello that shows Erasmo riding a horse in full battle dress without a helmet. Since the Romans, this was the first equestrian statue cast in bronze. It also created some controversy, since most equestrian statues were reserved for rulers or kings, not for mere warriors. This became the model for other equestrian monuments created in Italy and throughout Europe in the following centuries. He was becoming well known for creating imposing, larger-than-life figures using innovative techniques and extraordinary skills. His style applied the new science of perspective, which enabled the sculptor to create figures that occupied measurable space. Prior to this period, European sculptors positioned their figures in a flat background. Donatello also drew a lot of inspiration for his sculpture from reality, accurately showing suffering, joy, and sorrow in his figures' faces and body positions. The techniques used by Donatello are relievo schiacchiato, linear perspective, and gilding. Relievo schiacchiato literally means squash relief, an extremely shallow relief which portrays a sense of depth by barely grazing the surface with lines that seem to be drawn in the marble. An example of this is the Ascension with Christ giving the keys to St. Peter. The second one is linear perspective, a technique for giving a flat surface the illusion of depth. And the third one is gilding. Donatello also sculpted the Cavalcanti Annunciation in the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence, Italy, which is embellished with gilding, using gray pietra di Masigno or pietra sirena, a kind of sandstone.
Michelangelo di Ludovico Buonarroti Simoni, widely known as Michelangelo, was born on March 6, 1475, in Capri's Republic of Florence, Italy. He was an Italian Renaissance sculptor, painter, architect, and poet who exerted an unparalleled influence on the development of Western art. He is considered as the greatest living artist in his lifetime and held as one of the greatest artists of all time. Numbers of his works in painting, sculpture, and architecture rank among the most famous in existence. Due to his fame, his career was more documented than any artist of that time and earlier than that. He was the first Western artist whose biography was published while he was still alive. Two biographies for him was written by Giorgio Vasari in 1550 and another from Ascanio Condivi in 1553. His greatest arts that are widely known are the frescoes on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican and the depiction of the creation of Adam interpreted from Genesis. Michelangelo was a subtractive sculptor. Subtractive sculpture requires that pieces of material are chipped, sanded, or carved away so that the desired form is achieved. Materials that are used in subtractive sculpture include clay, wax, wood, and stone. He used a mallet and chisels and other tools to free a figure from the marble block. Michelangelo was so dedicated to his work that he would sculpt at night by attaching candles to his hat. His famous sculptures include the David in 1501, now in the Accademia in Florence, and the Pietà in 1499, now in St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. His last unfinished work is the Rondanini Pietà, which is testament and meditation about death and salvation of the soul before he died on February 18, 1564.
David is a masterpiece of Renaissance sculpture created between 1501 and 1504 by the Italian artist Michelangelo when he was just 26 years old. David is a 5.17-meter statue of the biblical figure and a favorite subject in the art of Florence. It is made of one single block of marble from the quarries in Carrara in Tuscany, one of the whitest in the world, and weighs 5,660 kilograms. It is made out of solid marble. The sling on his left shoulder and tree trunk behind his right leg were covered with gold leaf, being outdoors in Piazza della Signoria. The story of David and Goliath is a biblical one, found in Book 1 Samuel. The teenage David had to defeat the giant Goliath. He could not be defeated by strength since David was smaller. It took cunning and skill to defeat someone bigger than him, and he did so with a slingshot. Many statues before Michelangelo's that portray the story always show David after he has defeated the giant, with the head by his feet. Michelangelo decided to go against the current and portray David before the battle. You can see in his face the concentration of him thinking how he's going to do it. The rock hidden inside his right palm. The slingshot simulating a rest on his shoulder and him waiting for the right moment pretending to be at ease. He could only defeat the giant if he caught him by surprise, and he did.
The next famous sculpture of Michelangelo. As a theme in Christian art, depiction of the Virgin Mary supporting the body of the dead Christ, some representation of Pieta include the John Apostle, Mary Magdalene, and sometimes other pictures in other side of the Virgin. But the great majority show only Mary and her son. The Pieta was widely represented in both painting and sculpture, being one of the most poignant visual expression of popular concern with the emotional aspect of life of Christ and the Virgin. Since its creation in 1499, Michelangelo's Pieta has inspired emotion, faith, and imitation through its elegant depiction of Virgin Mary and the Jesus Christ. Yet, do you know the secrets that are still being uncovered about this centuries-old statue? So, how was Michelangelo discovered? Michelangelo was recognized for his artistic abilities at a young age. At 13, he was apprenticed to the painter Domenico Ghirlandaio, where he gained essential skills and exposure. Lorenzo de' Medici, a prominent patron of arts in Florence, noticed Michelangelo's talent and invited him to study at his academy, giving him access to the circle of influential artists and thinkers. Michelangelo's sculpture of the Pieta in the David showcased his technical mastery and artistic innovation, capturing widespread attention. His work on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, commissioned by Pope Julius II, made him internationally famous, establishing him as one of the Renaissance leading artists. Michelangelo is the most remembered for his talent in making art come alive, along with his ability to capture the intricacies of human anatomy and movement.
He was celebrated for his art's complexity, physical realism, psychological tension, and thoughtful consideration of space, light, and shadow. Many writers have commented on his ability to turn stone into flesh and to imbue his painted figures with energy.
To wrap it up, Donatello and Michelangelo, two of the most influential artists of the Italian Renaissance, transformed sculpture with their unique approaches to naturalism and human emotion. Donatello revived the classical nude and pioneered realistic pictures with groundbreaking techniques like relievo schiacciato, adding depth to his shallow reliefs. His David, the first freestanding nude since ancient times, symbolized a new direction in arts with its expressive realism. In contrast, Michelangelo took realism to new heights. He is sculptured like David in the Pieta, and his ceiling frescoes in the Sistine Chapel demonstrated his unmatched understanding of anatomy, psychological intensity, and light. His work set a new standard for Western art, showing how picture could seem to come alive in stone and paint. Through their art, they redefined what sculpture could express, blending beauty with psychological depth and setting enduring standard for Western art. Their legacies lay the foundation for the Renaissance and continues to inspire countless generations.